Halloween night, 2014. In Monroe County, Michigan, the air carried the chill of late October. Leaves crunched underfoot, pumpkins glowed on porches, and for the young people of this small town, the night promised nothing but fun. Among them was 22-year-old Chelsea Bruck, a bright, kind-hearted woman known for her shy smile and her creative spirit. Chelsea had been looking forward to this night for weeks. She had hand-stitched her own costume, a comic book-inspired outfit she was proud of. It wasn't the kind of generic costume you could buy at a store. It was unique, just like her. The party she attended that night wasn't small. It was a massive Halloween gathering in Frenchtown Township. More than 600 people crowded inside a barn and the surrounding property. Music blasted from speakers, alcohol flowed freely, and strangers mingled in the dim, flickering lights. Everyone was disguised, hidden behind masks, face paint, and costumes, but in that sea of characters and chaos, Chelsea disappeared. By sunrise, the party would be over, the laughter would fade, but Chelsea was gone, and what began as a harmless night of celebration would soon unravel into a chilling mystery that haunted her community for years. In the early hours of October 26th, the party was still raging. It was nearly 3 a.m. when Chelsea was last seen alive. Friends later recalled her laughing and dancing, but as the night wore on, she drifted away from the people she had arrived with. That wasn't unusual for a party this big. People moved in and out of groups, meeting strangers, taking photos, disappearing into the crowd. But what was unusual was that no one noticed when Chelsea failed to come back. Some partygoers thought she had gotten a ride home. Others assumed she had left with someone she knew. A few even said they saw her with a man in a Batman costume. But no one could remember his face and no one could confirm his name. With so many people in disguise, the details blurred. By morning, Chelsea still hadn't returned home. Her family knew instantly that something was wrong. Chelsea wasn't the type to vanish without a word. She was responsible, close to her parents, and careful about her safety. She always checked in, always came back. Now her phone was silent, her bed was empty, and her car was still where she had left it. The party had ended hours ago, but for Chelsea's family, the nightmare was just beginning. By sunrise, panic had already set in. Chelsea's mother dialed her phone again and again, each call going straight to voicemail. Hours passed, still no answer. For a family that knew Chelsea's every routine, the silence felt unbearable. By late morning, they reported her missing. Police didn't waste time, as they knew the first 24 hours were critical, but in this case, the task ahead was daunting. The Halloween party Chelsea had attended wasn't a quiet gathering of friends, it was chaos. More than 600 people had come and gone that night, many of them strangers. Some were drunk, some were masked, and most had no idea who Chelsea even was. Tracking down leads in that kind of storm was like searching for a shadow in the dark. Still, the search began. Flyers with Chelsea's face were plastered across town. Volunteers combed through wooded areas, ditches, and empty fields. Local news channels aired her photo, her pale face, her long blonde hair, the costume she had so carefully made for Halloween. Her disappearance didn't just shock her family, it rattled the entire community. Monroe County wasn't used to this kind of story. It was the kind of tragedy people saw on national news, not in their own backyard. But as the hours turned into days, hope began to fray. Witness statements poured in, but they were frustratingly inconsistent. Some claimed they had seen Chelsea outside the barn with a man in dark clothes. Others swore she had gotten into a car willingly. One rumor even suggested she had simply left the party to cool off and would eventually come back. But Chelsea didn't come back, and for investigators, the hardest part was sifting through the noise. Every witness had a different version. Every detail seemed to blur into another. Costumes, masks, alcohol. It was the perfect storm for confusion. Still, one fact stood clear. Chelsea was gone, and someone at that party knew exactly why. But this was only the beginning, because soon, investigators would stumble upon the first real clue. A clue that turned Chelsea's case from a missing person search into a nightmare no one could deny. Days turned into weeks, and still no sign of Chelsea. The community's hope was fading. But then investigators found something. On a quiet rural road just miles away from the party, a piece of fabric was discovered. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, just another scrap tossed aside. But when detectives examined it closely, their hearts sank. It wasn't just any fabric, but it matched the homemade costume Chelsea had been wearing the night she vanished. Soon, more fragments turned up. Each discovery painted a darker picture. Parts of her outfit, under the very costume she had stitched with her own hands, were scattered across isolated fields and dirt paths. It was as if pieces of her life had been deliberately torn apart and abandoned. To her family, this was devastating. These weren't just clues, they were reminders of Chelsea herself. left behind in places she should never have been, and to police it was confirmation of something they had feared from the start. This wasn't a case of a young woman deciding to leave on her own. Something sinister had happened. The scattered costume raised chilling questions. Was she attacked after leaving the party? Had someone lured her away? Or worse, had Chelsea been targeted long before that night? Rumors intensified. Some insisted she had left with the mysterious Batman seen at the party. Others whispered about strangers who didn't belong in the community. Online forums buzzed with theories, each one more disturbing than the last. But through it all, police remained tight-lipped. They had leads, but nothing solid enough to make an arrest. They knew someone somewhere held the missing piece of this puzzle. And then, the nightmare deepened. Months later, long after the Halloween lights had faded, Chelsea was finally found. But not in the way anyone had prayed for. With Chelsea's costume pieces discovered, the investigation grew more desperate. Detectives turned their focus back to the party. Somewhere in that crowd of 600 people they believed was the key to unraveling the truth. Witnesses were questioned again and again, but their stories clashed like puzzle pieces that would never fit. Some swore Chelsea had been seen outside with a man in a Batman costume. Others said she left with someone in a dark hoodie. A few claimed she wandered into the woods alone, though that theory quickly lost weight. The Batman lead caught the public's imagination. Online sleuths latched onto it, speculating about who the masked man could be. Police received dozens of tips, each one pointing to a different individual, but there was no hard evidence, only whispers and rumors. The longer Chelsea remained missing, the more theories spread. Some believed she had been kidnapped, others wondered if she had overdosed and someone had covered it up. A few cruel voices even suggested she had run away willingly, a claim her family dismissed instantly. Chelsea was happy, grounded, and close to home. She hadn't vanished by choice. For investigators, the challenge was cutting through the noise. Every rumor wasted precious time. Every false lead left the family more heartbroken. And still, the only thing they knew for certain was that Chelsea was gone. It wasn't until 6 months later, in April 2015, that the truth finally surfaced. A construction worker checking a remote property in Flat Rock stumbled upon something hidden in the dirt. Human remains. Police were called immediately. When detectives arrived, they realized what they were looking at was the nightmare they had feared from the very beginning. Dental records confirmed the identity. It was Chelsea Bruck. The community that had prayed for her safe return was devastated. What had started as a missing person search was now officially a homicide. The location where Chelsea was found raised disturbing questions. It was an abandoned area, quiet and isolated, a place no one would simply stumble upon. Whoever had left her there had chosen the spot carefully, far from the noise of the Halloween party, far from witnesses, far from help. And now police knew one thing for certain: Chelsea hadn't just vanished, she had been murdered. With the discovery of Chelsea's remains, investigators intensified their efforts. Forensic testing and DNA analysis soon revealed a breakthrough. Evidence linked the crime to a 27-year-old man named Daniel Clay. He wasn't a stranger in the community. In fact, he had even been questioned early in the investigation, but managed to slip through unnoticed. When police finally brought him in, Clay admitted he had been with Chelsea the night of the party, but his story shifted every time he told it. First, he claimed the two had left together willingly. Then he insisted things got out of control. Later, he tried to downplay his role entirely. Detectives weren't buying it. His accounts contradicted the evidence. The physical injuries on Chelsea's remains told a story that Clay was desperately trying to hide. In court, prosecutors painted the chilling picture. Daniel Clay had taken advantage of Chelsea after the party. When she resisted, things turned violent and he ended her life. He then abandoned her in a remote area, leaving her family to agonize for months before the truth came to light. The jury didn't hesitate. Daniel Clay was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to decades behind bars. For Chelsea's family, it wasn't justice in full. Nothing could bring her back, but it was at least accountability. Chelsea's death left a scar on Monroe County that is never fully healed. A night that should have been filled with laughter, costumes, and harmless fun became a haunting memory for an entire community. For months, her family had clung to hope that Chelsea would walk back through their front door. Instead, they were left with grief and with the reality of a life cut far too short. The case also left behind difficult questions. How many people saw Chelsea that night and yet missed the signs she was in danger? How could someone commit such a horrific act in plain sight, surrounded by hundreds of people, and get away with it for months? To this day, Chelsea's story is remembered not only for its tragedy, but also as a warning about trust, about predators hiding in plain sight, about how quickly a moment of celebration can turn into a nightmare. Chelsea Bruck went to a party to celebrate Halloween. She never came home. Her story reminds us that sometimes the real monsters don't wear masks. They walk among us, blending in, smiling, pretending to be just another face in the crowd. Chelsea's life was full of promise, her future just beginning. And while her killer now sits behind bars, the shadow of that night still lingers. Because the darkest truth about Chelsea's case is this: she could have been anyone's daughter, anyone's friend, anyone's sister, and in a single night she was gone.